Okay, today's Daf is Daf Yud Chesing. We learned full portion for Yosef Israel ben Chaim Michal and Elazar ben Ruma. The Mishnah had said that Yeshua's motive. We discussed what Yeshua was motive to the idea that even though he didn't hold a migu in the previous parak, in the case of Bari Veshema, where the woman knew her situation and the husband didn't know it as well, and Rabbi Gamliel said that she has a migu. And Rabbi Shua didn't agree with that. However, the migu in this Mishnah we're talking about is peshas or pesha hitter. That's a much stronger migu. It's not believing when I say X because I could have said Y. It's believing because I could have shut my mouth. I should have said nothing. Had I said nothing, there wouldn't even be, in the Lashon of the Gemara, there wouldn't even be shor shachot ufanecha. It's not like shor is an example. There's not even any shor here who was killed, and you say, who killed my shor? You know, who slaughtered my shor? That's the case where you have a case, for example, he claims she wasn't a psula, and they're arguing about why she wasn't a psula, right? Was she raped? Wasn't she raped? When was she raped, etc. But over here, in this case, what happened? Rabbi Yeshua said, if a person Reuben tells Shimon, this field that I've been working for the last, 30 years, you know what? It once belonged to your father, and I bought it from him. Had I kept my mouth shut, there wouldn't have even been an issue. Nobody would have known about it. That's called peshas or peshut. That's much stronger because Rabbi Yeshua there is moda. So yesterday's Gemara on Yud Zayin with Beis started to discuss, well, why do we give such a complicated case with this field used to belong to your father? Why talk about that case? What's the chiddush in there? And why didn't he tell me the field used to belong to you? So the Gemara says, well, that's a double pasha. Did he have a chazaka? Didn't he have a chazaka? So the Gemara is continuing with these questions today and Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, at the top of the page, the first line, the last word in the line, Daf Yud Ches. Why don't you say in the case? What do you have to talk about case with the father? I moted to your father, and a case of karka. Talk about a simple case, and you have to tell. Well, it's speaking about the reason you talk about the father is because the sefer there said if there's edim that it belonged to the father, then he's not believed. It's not peshaser. Peshaser is nobody knew that it belonged to your father except I'm coming and admitting it now. That's peshaser pesha hitter. But in the last case, the Sefer said, if there's Adam that belonged to the father, and he says, I bought it, well, then he's not believed. You have to have proof that you bought it from me. Either bring proof, meaning a bill of sale, or in lacking that, you could say, I had a bill of sale, but I lost it, and I was on the property for 3 years, a chazaka. Okay, so then you have to have proof, but he's not believed on his own. Not believed on his own when there's Adam. So the Gemara says, what do you have to have a complicated case like that? Simple. Tell me a simple case. Listen, Reuben tells Shimon, I once borrowed money from you. I borrowed $100. The prophet said I paid you back. Shehunem, and I believe Mishum. He's believed. The Toveya, let's call it Shimon over here. Reuben says to Shimon, I borrowed $100 from you once upon a time, and I paid you back. Remember that? I'm a good guy. Remember I bought $100 from you a few years ago, and I paid you back. You bought $100 from me. I don't even remember it. You don't even remember this situation. Yeah, well, that's peshas or pesha hitter. So why don't you tell me that case? Listen, the answer is because the Sefer says, if there's Adam, if you don't know about the transaction because I'm telling it to you, but rather because there's Adam, so the Sefer would say, if there's Adam that I borrowed the money of you, when I say parata, and I say I paid you back Adam. That was the words in the end of the Mishnah. And at the top of the Simon Alf, if there's Adam on it, then I'm not believed. What do you mean? If there's Adam that I borrowed the money from you, I'm not believed to say I pay you back. That's a machlokas. And let's say there's proof that I borrowed money from you 5 years ago. There's proof I borrowed money from you, and I say I paid you back, paid you cash. I have no proof. I pay you back. So the rule is the halacha is v'kaimulan. We hold. There's a machlokas about it. So that case wouldn't work out in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Shua's motive, pesha asar, pesha hitter. If I'm the one telling you about it, and you didn't know about it otherwise, or you didn't remember it, that's pesha asar, pesha hitter. If there's Adam, then it's not pesha asar, pesha hitter, and I wouldn't be believed. What do you mean? Even if there's Adam that I borrowed the money from you 5 years ago, there's witnesses to the situation. So I'm still believed to say, but yeah, I borrowed you. I borrowed in front of Adam. There were Adam. I agree that I borrowed. And I paid you back in the interim. What's the problem? So that wouldn't work out in the Mishnah because the Mishnah says if there's Adam and not believed, but I would be believed. So that case doesn't work out. So let's talk about a different case. Again, why talk about a case of karka and you have to worry about a chazaka, etc. The whole complicated thing Rabbi Shua's moda, whereas Ein Shar Kashnecha, Maishan Rishmir Mekarka, Rashi says Vitzach Lemeste Ba'aviv Mishum Sefer Linkot Milsev Metaltlin. Okay, so again, talk about cash. So say this case. Rabbi Shua's moda. I'll give you another case of Pesha Asar. Your father lent me $100, or he deposited it with me $100. I have $100 in my hand. The achalta pras, and I paid him back half. Now, normally, when you're moded to half, here we get into the complicated case of what's the case of half? A guy comes and says you owe me $100, and you say I only owe you 50. So that we learn that of Sukkim, famous Russia that's called modav mikzas. Modav mikzas taina yechavish food oraisa. Right? There's not many cases. We learned in Matos yesterday. You're not supposed to swear on your own, right? But there are cases when you have to swear. Now, there's many shvuas hesses which is rabbanan that make you swear anyway. But the shvua d'oraisa is modav mikzas. If you come and tell me that I owe you $100 and I deny the whole thing, min Torah, I don't have to make any shvua. I deny the whole thing, as we'll see, because as general idea, I wouldn't have the chutzpah to deny the whole thing if it wasn't true. So therefore, I don't have to make a shvua. Min rabbanan, the rabbanan say if make a shvua says but there's no shvua d'oraisa. Shvua d'oraisa is only if I admit the part of it. What's the svara behind it? We'll talk about the svaras, even though you don't need svaras when it comes to psukim on the Torah is based on psukim, but we'll see the svaras. It's going to depend on this machlok. So the Gemara says, why don't you tell this case? Rabbi Shua's moda, when a guy says, listen, Rabbi Shua's moda that peshas pesheter, in a case where a guy says, listen, your father gave me $100 and I returned 50, meaning I only owe 50. So is that motive b'mikzas? If it would be motive b'mikzas, I'd have to swear, right? 50 I'm motive to, and the other 50 that I deny, that I say I paid back already, I'd have to make a shvu about that. That would be if it's motive b'mikzas. So here we say, listen, motive b'shuva, omil chaver, marla bicha biyadi b'chal, the person I paid back, shu, nem in your belief, says Tosas, says Rashi, midaraisa below shvu. You don't have to make a shvu in that case. Why? Peshas or pesheter. Had I not come along and said anything, nobody asked me for any money. You didn't know about anything. I just said, you know what? Your father once gave me $100. I paid him back 50. So Rishua says, you know what? That's peshas or pesheter. So I said, so I only have to pay back 50. The 50 I'm believed about because I could have said nothing, right? So the Gemara says, who are you speaking this according to? Rishua is going according to. We're going to talk now about a machlokas between Rabbanan and Rav Lozer ben Yaakov in a case like this. So the Gemara says, I'll leave it in mind. Who's Rabbi Shua going? He's not going to come out like anybody. Why? If it goes according to the Rabbanan say, listen, what's the case of motive of mixas? Where Reuben says to Shimon, I gave you $100, and Shimon says, no, I paid you back 50, right? Yes, you gave me 100, I paid you back 50. That's motive of mixas. But over here, it wasn't Shimon who made the claim. Who made the claim? Was there a claim over here? There was no claim apparently. The guy came and said himself, I borrowed money, $100 from your father, and I paid him back 50. There was no claim. So in that case, so who is this a case of what it makes us? So the Gemara says, I'll leave it on. Rabbanan say, listen carefully. Even if there was a claim, but it wasn't made by Shimon, it was made by his son, that's not a claim. That's not a claim. That's not a claim that would be mechayivim. So what was he talking about? According to Rabbanan, that's called Meshav Aveda. Meshav Aveda means this. I come along and I say, listen, I found the wallet outside the shul and there's a lot of cash in here. Oh, so the guy said, oh, thank you very much. It's my wallet. Wait a minute. He looks at it and he says, it's missing some money over here. Can you swear, please, that you didn't take any of the money? So the rabbi said, listen, don't make the guy swear. He's Meshav Aveda. He returned an item. If everybody who returns an item is going to have to swear that he didn't take part of the money or steal part of it, nobody's going to return anything. Who's going to want to return? Why should I return the wallet? He's going to make you make a shvua. I don't want to do that. That's called Meshav Aveda. You don't have to make a shvua in a case like that. So who is this going according to? We're saying Rabbi Shua says he's in a case where I tell you that I borrowed $100 from your father and I paid him back 50. He's believed without a shvua. Big deal. Even if you told me that I borrowed money from your father, it's not you. It's not in borrow money from you. I borrowed from your father. The other Rabbanan even say in a case like that, it's Meshav Aveda. Not only a case where I came and said it. Even if you came and said that I borrowed money from your father, that's not a case of motive and mixes, because I didn't borrow money from you, as we'll see as far as why in a few minutes. And even if it's shor shachal, even if there's a claim, I wouldn't have to make a shvua. You're saying, if I came and said it on my own, peshas or peshit, I don't have to make a shvua. Even if there was a claim from the son, you don't have to make a shvua. Rabbi says you do need a shvua in this case. This is motive and mixas. Even in this case, where a guy comes along and says himself, I borrowed money from your father and I pay him back half, the other half. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov seems to say, even in that case, you have to make a shvuas. You have to make a shvuas motiv and mixas. So who's Rabbi Shua according to? According to Rabbanan, even if the son, the Shimon, let's say, claimed that they borrowed money from his father, I wouldn't have to make a shvua. So it's Rabbi Shua saying, if you came along and said on your own, peshas or peshit, what's the big deal about that? Even if the guy claimed that you borrowed money from his father, it's still Meishu Aveda. And according to Rabbi Yaakov, even if I admitted on my own that I owe you the money, I do have to make a shvua. So who's Rabbi Shua going according to? Neither one. Did Tanya. Here he tells you the case. Tanya Rabbi Yaakov or Pamsha Adam Nishbal Tanya says, listen to this. Sometimes you have to make a shvua motiv b'mixas, a shvua deraisa, even on my own admission. Tana is a claim, but here it's not a claim, it's like an admission. Case said, the guy says, listen, this is our case. You know what? Your father, I have $100 of your father's in his hand, in my hands. He gave me $100 to loan or a deposit, whatever. I paid him back half. I raise a nishba, and I have to swear, that's what Rav Yaakov says. Now we're going to ask Rav Yaakov in a minute. What kind of a claim is it? Where's the claim? Why is that the case? But that's what Rav Yaakov says. We'll talk about him in a minute. No, that's Meishu Avedo Potter. Even in a case where he says it on his own. Okay, even says it's certainly in the case where he says on, but even if there was a claim. So the Gemara now says what? So our point is, we've really answered the question. The question is, why did Rabbi Yeshua tell us that weird case in the Mishnah where this field that I've been working used to belong to your father and I bought it from him? Okay, if it's peshas or peshit, if there's no other witnesses that it was your father's land, that's it, peshas or peshit, and I don't have to pay anything. Why do you have to have that case? Why don't you have the case of the money? So the Gemara's answer is right away, but it doesn't make sense. Because who's Rabbi Shua going according to? According to the Rabban, he doesn't come out like the Rabban or like Rabbi ben Yaakov. If we have a machlokas about things, Rabbi ben Yaakov says, no, you're chayav b'shvus, but it mixes in that case. And according to Rabbanan, even if I didn't admit it on my own, if Shimon came and said that I owe his father $100, that's not a case of motive. That's also Meishav Aveda, even where he claimed it. So certainly where I said it on my own, what's Rabbi Shua teaching me? If I came along and said on my own, I owed your father $100 and I paid him back 50. Oh, you don't have to make a shvua. With the Rabbanan say, even if Shimon said that I owe his father $100, he came and made a claim. I also don't have to. That's also Meishav Aveda. Why isn't it motive and mixas? Because motive is only when I'm dealing with the guy himself. Shimon says I owed him $100. Not his father. That's right. It has to be a mix. No, we're not talking about the mid-field. We're talking about a case of money. We're saying forget the case of mix.
No. The question is, why do we need
the case of the field? Why don't you give a case of motive and mixas?
The case of the field is not a mix.
Yeah, okay, that's right. So, but he's saying that that's more complicated. Where you have to deal with the field and karka and chazaka. Just talk about a case of money and a case of motive and mixas. Why didn't he give me that case? So the Gemara's answer is because that case doesn't work out. It doesn't come out like it was from Yaakov, and it doesn't come out like Rabbanan. So now the Gemara asks, but let's understand what it was from Yaakov. What Yaakov says that there's times when I make a shvuas, I have to swear shvuas motive mixas even on my own admission. When there was no claim against me, my own Tana, Rabbi Yaakov, Leslie Meishav Aveda Potter, doesn't he hold of the idea of Meishav Aveda? If I come along and I say, listen, I found your wallet, or I owe you some money, or this and that, you don't have to make a shvua, because otherwise, why would Rabbi said in a case like that, you're Meishav Aveda returning a lost item? Otherwise, Rabbi said, don't make a shvua, because otherwise people won't return items. And this is the same thing. So I'm returning. You know what? I owe your father $50. He once gave me 100, and I paid him back 50. I owe him another 50. That's Meishav Aveda. So Rabbi Yaakov doesn't hold to that. He holds that's motive and mixes in your chayav. Rav, so Rav says betona cotton. I'll tell you what happened over here. It's speaking about where there was a claim. He didn't come on his own. If he came on his own, that's Meishav Aveda. But over here, it's speaking about where a katan made a claim against him. And as the katan said, you owe my father $100, and he said, I paid him 50. The pasuk says, ki titain ish al re'eu kesef okel lishmor, something like that. It says when an adult gave somebody something, right? because only if an adult gave somebody money and claimed something, then there's an issue of motive mixes, etc. And you don't swear at a time of a chereshat of a cotton. There's no such thing. So what do you mean claim that a cotton claimed from it doesn't mean anything? So Gemara says, no, my cotton, when he means cotton, he doesn't mean literally he's not bar mitzvah. He's a gadol, he's bar mitzvah, my cotton, the gabe mila of cotton. In other words, he's a cotton because he doesn't understand his father's business transactions. He's 15 or 20, but he didn't know what was going on. So he's like a cotton. Okay, so why do you call that tainus asmo? Why do you call that? Says sometimes you swear shvuas mother mixes doraisa on your own tana, right? In your own tana. What's the tana? What's the example? Kesad. Your father gave me $100 and I paid him back 50. I'm swearing. We said, how could that be? Why is that mother mixas? That's Meishav Aveda because you didn't say anything. Oh no, there was a claim. The kid was 15 or 20 and there was a claim. So why do you call that tanas asmo? That's not my own admission. There was a claim against me. Yachi tanas asmo, tanas acherim. There was somebody else who made a claim. Okay, he's a cotton. You call him a cotton because of that, but he's still a claimant. He says no, tanas acherim v'odos asmo. It's somebody else's claim and it's his admission. So cool tanas asmo. Every claim is that way. Somebody else made a claim and I moted the part of it. Right? That's every case like that. I'll explain the machlokas. The Gemara comes out this famous memra. We had it many places in Shas of what's the machlokas over here. What's the reasoning behind shvuas motive mixes? Why does the Torah say that if I deny the whole thing, I don't have to make a shvua? Minat Torah, right? I don't have to deny the whole thing. If I admit the whole thing, I pay it. But if I admit partial, I have to make a shvua on the part that I don't want to pay. Here's a machlokas of Rabba's part. Why did the Torah say that you have to make a shvua d'oraisa if your motive mixes, if you admit partially? Why? We have a presumption that a person would not be so insolent and have such chutzpah to deny the whole thing. Right? He would deny the whole thing. He really would deny the whole thing if he could. He knows he borrowed the money, even if he had an inclination to deny it. He doesn't have the money to pay back right now. Right, but so he says he would deny the whole thing, but he can't deny the whole thing because the guy lent him money. A regular person. We're not talking about, ejaculation. We're not talking about your case, right? We're not talking about this crook. But in general, a person would not have. Huh? What would the migu be here? What would the migu be here?
I could have denied the whole thing back before this.
Before we right. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering why isn't there a migu in the first case where he says your father loaned me $100. I paid back half.
That's the migu. That is the migu. That's pesha. That's pesha. Also pesha. That's the strongest migu. The strongest migu. Right. So now we're trying to say we say the reason why we finished with the Mishnah. Why didn't Rav Shapiro tell us that case pesha also pesha? They're the strongest kind of a migu because that doesn't work out where he came on his own. Why? Because according to the Rabbanan, even in this case, what's migu? Your father lent me $100 and I paid back 50. Believe me, because I could have kept my mouth shut. The Rabbanan say. So a migu like that, that's what we call a migu b'makom edim. It's a non-sadi that goes into this word migu b'makom edim, meaning we know you wouldn't lie that way. We know that's not a valid claim.
Right.
You can't claim that. It's a migu b'makom edim because it's a non-sadi that you wouldn't say that. So that's called like a migu makom edim or a migu makom chazaka. So here we have a chazaka. The guy wouldn't deny the whole thing. He wouldn't have the chutzpah. So therefore, he would be moda. So why doesn't he just moda and pay the whole thing? The answer is because of that he should have been moda because he's not going to lie. The reason he's not moda because he wants to push him off. He just doesn't have the cash right now. He doesn't have the money. So he says vasavar when I have the money, I'll pay him back. I don't have I can't deny the whole loan. I don't have the chutzpah to do that. But I'll say, you know what? I think I paid back part of it. I paid back 50 or 75% or whatever. So I figured, Rahman Hashem said, Rami Shvuah, put a shvuah on him. He said he should be motor because he should be motor to the whole thing. That's the reason for the shvuah. Rabbah says that's the shvuah. So the question over here is this. When he says, I don't have the chutzpah to lie, against who wouldn't he have the chutzpah to lie? Against the Baal Bin, the guy who gave him the money, he wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie. So therefore the Gemara is like this. No. It doesn't make any difference. I don't have the chutzpah to lie to him or to his son. I wouldn't have the chutzpah. It's not Meshav Abeda. You understand? So it's not a case where I find a wallet outside and I bring it inside. That's Meshav Abeda. I could have just walked away and not picked it up and not get involved in how much money was in it, or I stole half of it or whatever. That's Meshav Abeda. But over here, it's not Meshav Abeda. Why? Because Rashi says, really, we're speaking about a cotton. Tona cotton. Rashi says, meaning, and Rashi says over here also on base. Even if the child is a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and he says, you know what, you borrowed money from my father, $100. The guy would, according to Rav Yaakov, he wouldn't have the chutzpah to deny the whole thing. I wouldn't have the chutzpah to deny the whole thing. And therefore, the Shvuas Madam Mixes to Oraisa applies here too. Again, in terms of the Mishnah, right, Rabbi Yeshua give this case, it says what? Rabbi Yeshua would say, Pesha Aser Pesha Hitter, right? I told her about it. And why is it Pesha Aser Pesha Hitter? Okay, so according to Rav Yaakov, this is like Pesha Aser Pesha Hitter because there was a claim of something. There was a claim of a child, right? A child came and said it. Right, Pesha Aser Pesha Hitter if there's no claim at all. There's no claim at all, and I came along on my own, that'd be Pesha Aser Pesha Hitter. But according to Rav Yaakov, he says when there's no claim or there's a claim of a katan, but there's a claim of a katan, it's still a shvua d'oraisa because I wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie. The underlying reason for motor mitzvah is because I wouldn't have the chutzpah to deny it against the balbin, the father, or the son. So that's why he says no meshav aveda and yechayv shvua d'oraisa, and that certainly wouldn't be like Rabbi Yeshua because Rabbi Yeshua is talking about pesha pesha hitter. Rabbanan sabri bohu deina meyas. I wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie to the person who lent me the money, the father in this case. No meyas. I would have the chutzpah and mashi zafilu gadol. Even if it's a 20-year-old, but he's not the one who lent me the money. So him I deny. To the guy who gave me the money, I wouldn't have the chutzpah to deny the whole thing. But to his son, I would. Oh, is meishaveda. Since I didn't, that's meishaveda. So why didn't Rabbi Shua? Rabbi Shua was talking about why didn't you tell me? Why the Gemara's cash was? Why didn't Rabbi Shua tell me case of peshas or peshitter in this case where I said, listen, I came along. Not that I came along and I said, I have your father's field that I bought from him 30 years ago, but I have your father's money that he lent me $100 and I paid him back 50. Then I'm peshas or pesha hitter. So the reason it doesn't come out like the Rabbanan is why? Because the Rabbanan say you don't have to say peshas or pesha hitter. Even if a child, your father's field, your father's money, even if it was a child, the Rabbanan say that's peshas or pesha hitter. Even if a child, a 20-year-old son says, oh, my father lent you $100. Where's the money? And I say I paid back 50. That's also Meishav Aveda because I could have denied the whole thing. I could have denied. That's why it's Meishav Aveda. I could have denied the whole thing. When is there Shvuas Mitzvahs? When I wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie. I wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie the guy who lent me the money. But to the son, I would have the chutzpah to lie. So I could have denied the whole thing. And since I didn't deny it, that's also Meishav Aveda. It's Peshas or Peshitter. It's more than Peshas or Peshitter because it's Meishav Aveda. I don't even have to admit anything over here because I could have denied the whole thing easily, and I didn't. Therefore, it's Meishav Aveda, meaning Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Banim would agree, but what's Rabbi Shua's chiddush? Rabbi Shua says, if I come along and say myself that I borrowed money, $100 from your father, and I paid back 50, you believe him, right? Why didn't we say that case from Shua? The answer is, according to Rabbanan, even if I didn't come along myself, the son came and told me that it would also be potter. It's also pesha because it's not a case of motive and mixas, and therefore it's a bigger. So therefore, that's why we didn't say that case, and we gave the case instead. The Mishnah gave the case of the field and not the money. So that's the idea.
In the case of the father,
yeah.
If he denies the whole thing, why do you need then? In other words,
if he would deny the whole thing, if he denied the whole thing,
yeah.
Even if it wasn't a case of son and father against the guy itself. You come and tell me I owe you $100, and I say I don't owe you a thing. I'm believed minat Torah because I wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie. The rabbi said I have to make a shvua test. I still have to make a shvua. But minat Raisa, there's no shvua because the assumption is I wouldn't have the chutzpah to deny the whole thing unless it was true, and therefore I don't have to say anything. I'm believed without any shvua. That's what the Torah said. Now the question is, does that svara apply even if it was your son who made the claim? Tell me to your father or not? The Rabbanan say, I wouldn't have the chutzpah to lie to you, but to your son I would. And since I didn't, it's Meishav Aveda. It's just like I'm returning a wallet. It's like I'm returning a lost wallet because I could have lied and said the whole thing. Therefore, I believe.
The guy has a good lawyer.
Yeah.
And understands
the svara is behind it. Yeah, he could.
You
That's why the rabbi said shvuas esses, because of the lawyers. Because of that. That's why the Rabbanan said, you're right. Torah, that's right. But the people could think of all these shtick, and therefore they have to make a shvuas esses. Says the Mishnah, when you have a star, a regular star in a business transaction, it's a loan, it's an IOU, or it's a bill of sale. It has to have Adam signed on it, right? You have to have to be valid as a star. Now you can have an oral transaction. I lent you $50. A guy comes over and sure, you have $50 from me. I'll pay you back tomorrow. I owe you, fine. But when it comes to claim, I can only claim from a talton. I can't claim from kark. I can't. That my property is not leaning towards that unless there's a star. The star, though, how do we know the star is valid? So the star, you have to say, how do we know these Adam that you didn't forge them yourself? The answer is they have to be confirmed. Either other people, the court can confirm them by bringing other Adam. Either the Adam themselves say, yes, we can testify those are our signatures, or other people can. Might have another star that was already confirmed in Bezdin, and those Adam are signed on a star. Now you see, you compare the signatures, and the signatures are the same. You can confirm it that way. Here, what happens is you have a star, and it hasn't been confirmed yet, and the Adam themselves come and say, we're confirming it. Yes, we were there at the transaction. However, when we signed it, there's a problem. Adam Sha'amru Ksavya said, this is our signatures. Yes, you're right. The signatures were there. We were there. The transaction took place. The loan, the sale, whatever. We were forced to sign it. In other words, we didn't sign it willingly. We were forced to at gunpoint. Or Ktanamayinu, we were there, but when we signed it, we weren't valid witnesses. We were children. Or Psuleidasinu, we were gamblers or crooks of some sort, or we were relatives. We weren't. So that Hare Elam they believe. What's this Mishnah doing over here? Peshas or Pesheter. It's the same thing we've been talking about. If the eight of themselves are confirming it, Toch K'dei Dibur. They're saying, listen, is this star valid or not? Is this a valid IOU or a valid bill of sale that you could make a claim on from Karka? So, because anybody confirm these things, the witnesses themselves come along and say, yeah, that's our signature. However, when we signed it, we were forced, or we were psuleitis, we weren't good Adam. They're believed. Why? Peshas or Pesheter. They didn't have to say anything. They're the ones who are confirming it. And talk to they did, but they're saying, well, we were forced. They're believed. Im yesh Adam shu ksav yadam. Let's say there's Adam that it's their ksav yadam, meaning there's other witnesses who can confirm these are their signatures. Oh, shoy ksav yadam yasum makmacher. Or Bezdin had another star that was already confirmed and the signatures match. Then they're not believed. Why? Because we're confirming this star based on other testimony. There's Adam that the star is good. They want to come along and passel the star. They're not believed. So again, the first case is Peshas or Pesheter. This is very similar to Rav Yeshua, right? In the first Mishnah, right? This field that I have that I've been on for 30 years, you belong to your father, and I bought it from him. Okay, Peshas or Pesheter. But if there's proof that it belonged to his father, then you don't believe the guy. Okay, what's the svar over here? Amar Muhammad, Lo Shana El Shamra Nusamayu Machmas Mama. This that we say, we're assuming now, Rav Muhammad is going on the Sefer of the Mishnah. We said in the Sefer, if there's other Adam that these are their signatures, or their signatures can be confirmed in a court because the court has other documents that have been already approved and confirmed that have the same signatures. Amar Muhammad, Lo Shana El Shamra Nusamayu Machmas Mama. This that we say that they're not believed is only if they say we were forced for money. They paid us $1,000 to sign over here. The transaction took place, but we didn't sign it willingly. We were paid to do it. So then we say they're not believed. But let's say even that the star was confirmed by other witnesses or by other stars over there, and they say we were forced, they were going to kill us. The guy was ready to kill us if we wouldn't sign. We were there at the transaction, but we didn't want to sign it. He forced us at gunpoint to do what he would have killed us. Harel, they are believed. They are believed to say we were ktanim, we were psuleitis, etc. Here we're talking about specifically, but they were forced. Right? We're talking about the first case when they were forced. If they say we were forced because they bribed us to sign, then they're not believed. We have signatures already. Your signature's been confirmed by the court or by other Adam, then you're not believed. It's what you call you're not believed against the Adam. There's Adam against you. Right? But if you say you were forced because the guy was willing to kill you, then you are believed. Amalei Rav Akol Kaminik. Is he believed? Is he empowered in the case too? We have a klal that you can't recant your testimony in court. You can't change your testimony, right? Not like Filber and these guys are investing everybody back and forth. Once you give testimony, it's right. Posticim lo yagid. You can only testimony once, right? It's learned out. You only allowed to say things once. Once you say something, you can't change your mind. Now, if we have Adim that these are your signatures, it's like you testified in court to this transaction. That's only when you're testifying in court orally. Here, what's your testimony? Because you're signed on the shtar. You signed that this event took place. If Adim are signed on a shtar, it's as if that they've been interrogated in a court and they've been questioning whether this took place. And they said, yes, this is our signatures and this event that took place. So what's the difference if they were forced, they were bribed, or they were forced at gunpoint? If their signatures have already been confirmed. In other words, you understand what happened over here? This is not like where the guy comes and says, we're confirming our signatures, but we were forced. Like in the first part of the mission. That's Peshas or Peshater. We didn't have to confirm it. We're confirming it, but we're saying there's a caveat over here. We were forced to do it. That we understand. But if there's Adim that the signature is a good signature, we don't need you. We don't need you over here. You want to come on and say that you were forced? No, we're not. We don't believe you at all.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Believe the ratio of the Mishnah.
Yeah.
You see that all the Adim are doing is confirming the signature. So in the Adim doesn't mean that they didn't see the signature. That was the Adim are part of the transaction. In the ratio, the Adim are part of the transaction because the shtar over here. What happens? The litigants have come to court now, right?
And they said we have the shtar over here.
Prove the signature.
And prove the signatures. If you don't prove the signatures, all you have is an oral IOU, and you don't have any shtar. You can't go from that, right? Okay. So he denies. So the Adim come and say, we did sign it. It took place, but we were puzzled at the time. Either we're talking about the part that we were forced. We were forced to do it. Peshas or Peshahitter says that there's no confirmation. There's no confirmation. No, there's no confirmation. There's no confirmation because they admit it. Had they not come along now, we don't have any confirmation. So they were whoa. If they were independent Adim, then they're not believed. That's the safer. The ratio though says if there is no other witnesses, right. There's no other confirmation about these signatures. It's just them themselves.
Right.
They come along and say, yeah, we signed on it, but we weren't good. They're believed, and there's no confirmation. You believe them that they were forced because the only confirmation you have is with them, and they're saying that they weren't good Adam at the time. Either they were forced, or they were children, or they were proven. That's the first part of the mission. At this point, we're assuming we're dealing with the second part of the Mishnah. Rav Meir Shapiro said, you know what? If there is independent confirmation, that they're not believed is only if they say they were bribed, because to say that you signed on a shtar because you were bribed, we'll see what's the reason. Why aren't you believed? Why aren't you believed in that? Because you can't testify about yourself. You're saying you're a Russia. You're saying I took a bribe to sign something. It means you're a Russia. Person not believed to say about himself. A person, you can't, just like you can't testify about your wife or about your son or about your parents, you also can't testify about yourself for good or for bad, says Rashi. So therefore, in this case, where in the ratio, right, we're going to talk about the ratio, but the ratio is simply I'm believed anyway because it's Peshas or Peshahitter. I didn't have to say anything. I could have said nothing. You only believing me based on this. So you have that svara, right? The Gemara is going to come out with that. The Gemara is going to talk about that. But if you're making yourself a Russia, you wouldn't believe that. What you're bringing is a good point, right? About the Russia, we're going to come to that. But the first part of the Mishnah read simply is Peshas or Peshahitter. The Sefer, which we're describing now, says if there's Adim, then you're not believed. So the Gemara Rav Meir Shapiro seemed to say, that's what he said. That's only you're not believed if you say you were bribed, then you're making yourself a Russia. But if you were forced at gunpoint, then you are believed. And says why? Once you testify, in other words, if your signatures have been confirmed independently, that means that's what it is. You can't testify against that. You're not believed to testify against that. So this doesn't make sense that Rav Meir Shapiro said it on the Sefer. Therefore, he's going on the ratio, and this is your point. Now we're going to see your point. Ella ki itmar, when Rav Meir Shapiro said this, a ratio, it's taka going on the ratio. We said Harel and Amanim, right? They're believing the Reisha Peshas or Peshiter. If you're talking, it's exactly your point. The exact point. If you're talking about you're not believed because you can't make yourself Russia. This that we say in the Reisha, that you say in the Reisha, that what? That Peshas or Peshiter. And if they themselves are confirming it, they can also say that they were no good. This that we leave them as only if they were said we were forced because at gunpoint. Because if I was forced at gunpoint, I'm not making myself a Russia. I'm saying I was forced at gunpoint. I had no choice, right? But if they say they bribed us to sign it, right, then they're not believed. My time, Russia, because you make yourself Russia. That's exactly your point. In the ratio, the Peshas of Ramacham is qualifying the first part. This is you say Peshas or Pesheter is only if it makes sense, if they're not making themselves a Russia. For example, also in when they say nanus and they say ktanim hayunu psula edus hayunu, they're also not making themselves Russia. They're simply saying, listen, I was a relative at the time, or I was a cut, now I grew up, or I was an Eved and now I was free. Now I'm okay, but I wasn't a Russia. If you say you were bribed, right? If you say you were, it was our signatures, but we were bribed to sign them. We don't believe that you were bribed, so you're not. It's not Peshas or Peshit because Russia. Again, it's like a Migu Mamokim Adam. We have Adam that a non-Sadi, you can't make yourself a Russia, or it's not acceptable, so therefore you're not believed to say that. All right. Tanur Rabbanan. So that's what we have in the Mishnah. Tanur Rabbanan. Now, this part of that we say in the Mishnah that if Adam come along and say Peshas or Pesheiter, meaning Adam that say this was our signatures, they're confirming it, but we were forced, let's say at gunpoint, or we were children at the time. Check my Tudat Zahut. You'll see that I was only 10 years old at the time of this document, right? I was a child, or if you have a Tudat Zahut, you don't even need the guy, right? You could prove it from there. Or we were Psuli Edis, we were relatives at the time. He was my brother-in-law at the time, or whatever. So we say over there that you're believed. Now we're going to have a machlokas about that. Rav Meir says no. Even in the ratio, you're not believed. You're not believed. Even with this peshas, you're not believed. We'll see why. Chum say you believe. It says that, right? We are believed. We're believed. Why are they believed in the ratio? Peshas or Pesheter. We're the ones confirming. We're also the ones saying we were children. We were krovim. We were forced at gunpoint, right? Peshas or Pesheter. They're believed when there's no other independent confirmation. Rav Meir, my timer. Why does Rav Meir say they're not believed in the ratio? The Sefer, I understand. Everybody agrees. If there's independent confirmation, I'm not believed to contradict that. But why am I not believed in the ratio? Peshas or my timer. So Bishlam Psuli Edis. I'll tell you what Psuli Edis. What do we have Psuli Edis? That they were relatives, right? They were relatives, or they were gamblers, or something like that. You know what Meir says you're not believed? Why? Because Malva Gufe Mikora Medic Daike. The Malva, when he's lending out money, or the seller, or the buyer who's paying for this karka, right? In whatever the star was, he's going to make sure that the Adam are valid Adam. He's going to be careful and check them out carefully. In other words, you're not believed to say this signature. You want to say that these signatures are no good because we were relatives or we were gamblers. So Meir says, you're not believed. That's not Peshas or Pesheter. Not Peshas or Pesheter. Why? Peshas or Pesheter means you have nothing to lose over here. But you're saying something which doesn't make sense. You're saying that you were Psuli Edis at the time, that you were relatives. Meir says we don't believe you about that because just like we don't believe you make yourself a Russia. We don't believe that the Malva, the guy putting out the money, or the Lokeach, if it was a purchase, would put money down and not even check that the Adam weren't kosher. Tanim Nami, we have a presumption. We have a presumption in a star that children don't sign on a star. It's a presumption. You see Adam signed on it. We know that. In other words, that's not a valid argument. That's a baloney argument to say, yes, we were there. We testify. We did see it. But we were 10 years old at the time. That goes against our general presumption that children don't sign on a star. You have a star, you have to assume that it was done by a gadol. And if you have a star, you have to assume it wasn't done by Psuluis. Eli Nus in my time. What's his reasoning? What's Rav Meir's reasoning? He says, listen, that's a valid thing to say, listen, we signed on the star, the transaction, but we were forced at gunpoint to sign. We were forced at gunpoint. What's wrong with that? You're not making yourself a Russia. And it's a valid argument. Maybe you were signed. Yes, they were dolim. They weren't relatives. They weren't gamblers. But we were forced. Why does Rav Meir say they're not believed to say that? Rav Meir must hold Adam she'amalem chismu sheker ba'al taharga. If Adam were told, listen, sign this, meaning it didn't take place, sign here, even though it didn't take place. See, in the case of the Ketanim or Krovim, they're saying it did take place, but we weren't good. Over here, they're saying we were forced at gunpoint because the transaction really didn't take place. So he says, Mayor holds, if Adam were told either sign on this document or we're going to kill you, they should be killed and not sign. That's what Mayor must hold. Rabbi, how could you say something like that? Come on. At these Adam come to us. If Adam come to you and ask Shaila, listen, this guy said, if I don't sign on this false document, right, an IOU or a sale, he's going to kill me. What should I do? What should I do? If they would come to us to ask us, Amrina, what will we tell them? Zilu Chasima, go sign. Don't get yourself killed. Damar, we have a cloud. The only mitzvahs that you can, the only time that you have to give up your life is for the three cardinal sins: idolatry, adultery, and murder. If you're told to do that, either kill him or either we're gonna kill you. If you don't kill this guy, you have to let yourself be killed. Same thing and Avodah Zarah. Only for those three, but not signing on a star. So how can you tell me? So Bilvad, only those three. So Sahashta the Chasma Minalu Amai Chasma. If they would ask us a shaila, should we sign or should we get killed? You would say sign it. Now that they signed it, we're going to tell them, why did you sign it? Like you say, you're not believed to say that you were forced. Why aren't you believed to say you were forced? If you were forced at gunpoint, you should have signed it. So why isn't that a valid argument? El time to Rav Meir, to Rav Rav Meir, why he says, again, Rav Meir disagrees with our Mishnah. Rav Meir says that the Edom are not believed in any case in the Mishnah, whether there's independent confirmation in the Seifa or either they're coming on their own. They're not believed to say Bertana because if a star in front of you, you can't assume that it was written by a cotton. And if you don't assume that they were Pasla Adis because the Malva or the purchaser would have, before he put his money down, would have made sure that there are good Edom. What's Rav Meir's reasoning by that? Nusim? You know what we're speaking about in this case? The lova is moda that he borrowed the money. The issue, that's the issue over here. If the lova says, I didn't borrow the money, and you're trying to confirm the Adis, and the Adis says, yeah, we signed it, but the guy held the gun to my head. Didn't take place, he didn't lend him the money. Then Rav Meir would be moda to Rabbanan, like the Push Pshat in our Mishnah. But Rav Meir says where he's not believed, when Rav Meir says, Rabbanan ain't the money leposo, did Rav Meir, even for a case of Anusma, it's speaking about where the lova's motive the money took place, that the loan took place, or the mocher's motive that the lokeach, that the purchaser gave him the money. So in a case where he's motive b'shtashakosvu ain't sofagama, you don't need clear confirmation. In other words, the reason why we say we don't believe these guys, Rav Meir's reasoning is not really that we don't believe them, it's simply we don't need them in this case because motive b'shtashakosvu ain't sofagama. Says Rashi on the right side over here, motive b'shtashakosvu lo b'shahoda b'shtashakosvu al piv nechmo edim. Once he admits that he borrowed the money, he's not believed to say that he paid it back. It was a kosher star, he did borrow the money. We're talking about the lowers of Shikasu come up, and Suladim, in other words, it doesn't hold like we said before. We said on Aleph before that we paskin that a person who admits to a loan, ain't so enough to pay him back. But over here, we're not talking about whether he paid him back or not. We're talking about did the loan take place? Once the loba was moda that the loan took place, he can't deny it now, and therefore he was Makayim B'shtar. Whether he paid it back is a different issue. Right, that goes into the shiloh. If you lend money in front of Adam, if you borrow money from Adam, you have to pay it back with Adam. But here we're speaking about where the guy admitted to it, and that's why he went. But if the guy wouldn't admit to it, and a chanami, that would be even Rav Meir would be merit to Rabbanan. That's a valid thing when you only have to come on to the Adam themselves who signed on it to say, yes, those are our signatures, but we were forced at gunpoint. If the loan was not motive to the loan, and a chanami, we would believe him, and therefore the loan, the shtar would not be confirmed. All right, we'll pick up here tomorrow, Misham Gufa, which discusses this issue.